everybody. Welcome to Session 0. This is our Christmas episode, which means absolutely nothing. It just happens to be dropping right before Christmas. We are talking with players. We are talking about classes, the first of 2 episodes, diving into why, what for, what's good about it, what sucks. So let's get into it. And welcome everybody to the show! I love the awkward wave. It's my absolute favorite thing. All right, you got some familiar faces here. Everybody's been on the show this far, so everybody, welcome back. It's so great to have you. Let's get started with some introductions, and we're going to start with Jess. We've heard about Tazu in the past, but for the new folks, tell us about your Blue Dragonborn.
Hi, I'm Jess. I currently play a Blue Dragonborn monk named Tazu. She's way of the open hand for monk people. We'll probably get into that in a minute. And she's super cool and I like her a lot.
That's the best kind of intro you could possibly ask for. Next up is Nicole with Olash, our favorite barbarian from the Improvised Weapons podcast. Hello, Nicole.
Hello. As Lincoln said, I most recently played Olash, the half-orc barbarian on Improvised Weapons. And Olash, what can I say about Olash? Olash was formerly the tambourine player in a very famous orc band. Also had a great career as a model, but she left the fame and fortune behind her to adventure and fight for the rights of other creatures who maybe didn't have the best reputation, just like her. And also she really wants to learn how to read, which she still hasn't fully accomplished yet, but maybe someday. Reading
is important. Rachel, tell us about Naxori, your delightful tiefling druid.
Okay. Yeah, so Nax is a socially awkward tiefling druid who tries really hard to make friends with animals, and it doesn't always work out, and really has a love for setting things on fire, but will defend plants and animals to the ends of the earth, even if it's uncomfortable when she tries to speak to them in a casual or social manner. But yeah, I love her a lot, and she's a little weirdo.
Inevitably, if I'm trying to throw monsters at the party and there are any animals, they will never fight because she will always try to talk to them. But speaking of fighting, hey, how about that transition? Ha! Next up is Dylan with his fighter, Orson.
Orson Kier, human fighter. So, pumpkin spice latte of classes and races. So Orson began as the starter kit human fighter and evolved a little bit from there. He is not technically that first character. He was reintroduced just to make a more interesting background, which is to say any background at all, and some different character choices, but evolved into kind of a dumb rushing in, doing his mostest all of the times, who is really just trying to be out there making his friends and make the world a better place. He's a nice guy, but he will fuck some shit up, if I'm allowed to say that. Lincoln will tell me later if I'm allowed to say that.
Absolutely. Not only that, but as opposed to Roran, your first out-of-the-box character, Orson has a Southern accent.
That's true. That was by accident. I did not plan on that, and then decided on, here, I can do a character voice, and Southern was all I could summon, being a displaced North Carolinian.
Next is our halfling rogue friend. You remember him. It's Jordan with Martin Merrily.
Martin Merrily, I've decided, is a dirtbag. He really is. He's a halfling thief and loves mischief, and I think is really a burden to the party. But I try to play him as funny and charming as possible so that no one eats me. And thus far, it's worked out pretty good. I remain uneaten. And yeah, I've played Martin in a bunch of campaigns. I usually lightly change his character name, actually. Sometimes it's Merrily Martin. Sometimes it's Tamerlane Flynnfire, but it's actually just the same guy because he's just stolen his way out of every good thing in his life. So he just has to reinvent himself from town to town. But yeah, he's, the typical halfling trickster type, lightfoot halfling thief. Always looking for a good time, and again, a character that very much seeks joy. And he gives me an opportunity to use my not-so-great Irish accent, which is what I use for him. So there you go.
I love a good Irish accent, and mine is not great.
No, nor is mine.
The only thing worse is my Scottish, because it always goes
for dwarves.
Irish.
For dwarves, exclusively for dwarves.
Just in general.
All dwarves are Scottish.
I tried a Scottish accent for my gnome, and it just always went Irish, no matter what I did. So now he's just Scotch-Irish. Next up is a twofer. This is huge, everybody. Matt Woods is back, and he's going to be talking about a necromancer, which is a homebrewed class that he did, and Warlock from 2 different games. Matt, let's start with Betwixt, and then let's talk about Ozzy. Why did you pick those classes for him?
Honestly, I was leaning more toward Necromancer with Betwixt because I wanted something spooky and witchy. And also, I felt like our party needed a cleric. And
We did.
a Necromancer isn't exactly a cleric, but they do what they can.
I mean, the joke is a necromancer is just a cleric who got there too late.
Exactly. There have been several instances where Betwixt has accidentally killed someone and been like, should I bring that NPC back? I can. It never works out well.
No. And how about Ozzy, your satyr?
Ozzy, my satyr, for him, I'd chosen satyr first and was trying to pick a class that kind of fit. And I was leaning toward bard, but someone else in our group was also leaning that direction. I was like, I'm open, so I can pick something else. And so decided to go warlock, and I went Fey aligned, of course. So Ozzy Greengrass is like the stoniest, like somewhere between Bill and Ted and Scooby-Doo. He's in service to Pan, looking for a bunch of shit that Pan has lost.
Delightful.
Mhm.
And what is Ozzy's catchphrase?
Oh, which one? I've definitely used "it's a ghost" before. In game, he learned "yeehaw." What other dumb shit? Oh, do you know Pan?
Yeah, and that's gotten him into lots of trouble. In our last adventure, they get to the big bad, and everybody's like, all right, what are we going to do? We're going to talk to him. And he just runs straight at her screaming, do you know Pan?
Yeah, pretty much
And I was like,
anyone
all right.
that is like an elf or fae in any way, like Ozzy straight to like, hey, do you know Pan?
And I was like, all right, roll initiative. Here we go. So much for this dialogue I wrote. And lastly, welcoming back Fred to talk about Cassian, his human bard. Hey, bard man.
Cassian is a human bard. He is kind of your classic sort of smooth talking, slightly in over his head guy, kind of a little bit of a Han Solo archetype with maybe like a little bit of like Steve Martin from Bowfinger mixed in there. I don't know. You know, his whole deal is that he is like, his whole life he's been kind of like struggling to come from behind, and so he's just learned to kind of fake aura of like confidence and competence and, you know, dashing suaveness. And at some point he met, you know, a more seasoned bard who kind of recognized his talent for kind of like weaving stories out of nothing as a form of bartery, essentially, and convinced him that, you know, if he just kind of faked it till he made it hard enough, he could kind of lie his way into actual magic. And that's basically what he's been doing ever since. His goal is to kind of rep his own legend so hard that he becomes like a living myth, basically.
I dig it. All right, let's dive into these questions. I'm going to leave you in grid view so we can all just chime in as we go. I'm going to start with Jess, work my way around. Which came first? Your race, your class?
For Tazu, class came first. I gotta hand it to Marisha Ray on Critical Role for making monks seem like super cool. So
Right.
yeah, so I love Bo on Critical Role. So I was like, I want to play a monk, even though I know she's playing like a homebrewed,
Now official.
like right now official, but at the
Mhm.
time was a homebrewed subclass
Mhm.
that Matt had made. So I knew I obviously wasn't going to do that, but I was like, I want to do a monk. That seems really cool to just punch things.
Mhm. Or as it has become known in our party, you just do monk shit.
You just do monk shit. That's good.
Mhm.
Or as Tazu says, I hit it with my quarterstaff.
All
That's what she says.
right, Olash. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Which is which?
Race or class?
No, I know. Definitely, absolutely, class came first. I love D&D so much, and I've been playing for quite a while, but I have a really hard time keeping track of rules and like clues and like taking notes and all that stuff. So when our wonderful DM Sam from Improvised Weapons asked me to be on the show, I was like, great, I'll be a barbarian because you can go real low intelligence and be real dumb, and that way if I do something dumb, it just seems like Olash did something dumb. So that was kind of that was my whole game plan.
And that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Wifey, Naxori, which came first, Tiefling or Druid?
I was thinking about it and I can't really remember, but I'm pretty sure I picked Druid first because I hadn't played a Druid before. I had always wanted to play a Druid. I had been playing a Ranger and I had played that a couple times, and I really wanted to play a Druid to be like my best woodland fairy witch self. And when I chose Tiefling as my race, I then kind of just paired it together that like Nax ran away from home after like being imprisoned and like got lost in the woods, and this Druid found her and like took her in and taught her how to be a Druid. So she learned to appreciate the land, and she had always kind of stayed on the outskirts of town because of issues with tieflings, and she didn't know if she would be accepted, having grown up in a home where she wasn't accepted. So then it kind of paired nicely together and like helped me make a pretty, good coherent backstory. But yeah, I definitely picked Druid because I wanted to do stuff with animals and plants, and yeah, so I love playing a Druid. It's a lot of fun.
And only because you're writing a novel. What's the name of your Druid mentor?
Lincoln asked me off guard in our game what my Druid mentor's name was, and I had never thought about it because I don't know why I didn't think about it. So his name is Trevor. Trevor, my Druid.
Trevor the Druid. He shows up a lot now because his name is Trevor. Yeah. It's fun for me.
I promise other names are more creative. It's like my go-to name in improv. It was always just like Trevor was in the office. Like, you have it when you play improv games, like you always have like a male and female name. You always say Trevor was always my name. So that's what his name is.
I like Trevor.
Right? Yeah. It's a great name.
Weirdly, my go-to male names are Kyle, Steve, and Jeff, which are my best friend, my father, and my father-in-law.
There you go.
Orson, human fighter. Clone of Roran? Or was there thought involved?
Are you kidding me? His intelligence is below the standard array. Like you talk about the barbarian that can't remember anything. That's part of the fun, right? Is getting in and having no idea what's going on. So it was mostly cloned. I didn't want to overhaul the starter game too much, so I built the human fighter again. But in building it and in thinking about the choices I was going to make, and especially what I was going to do differently, and I think this is how I would approach it if, starting from scratch, is I really liked thinking about his background first, if that makes sense. Like, even if it's not the whole fleshed out story, pages and pages, which by, 6 months into a campaign, you've got an entire notebook filled with the backstory you didn't know when you started. Just the concept of where they come from, what they want, and what they would do to get it was a big part of building a character like that for me. So, and I think if you're going to play a fighter in particular, it's hugely important to have that, because how else do you customize? So that was sort of where I approached it from. And so I think the background would be the very first thing, but class comes next, and then race, I think, because that's sort of lowering in level of customization, how much difference it brings to the table from the background to the class. Then I think race, you just sign a slot in what sounds fun.
And Martin, was he a halfling first or was he a rogue first?
Despite the fact that I am a halfling in real life, I never really think of them first. I never really consider race first when making a character, to be honest. I usually look at what class I'd be interested in. I'm actually very boring, though. Because I'm mostly the DM for my group, I rarely even get to make characters. But looking back on all my past characters, they're almost always rogues and wizards. And I think the reason for that is because I don't like playing low intelligence characters. I think they're fun. I would have a ton of fun, I think, if I really tried to sit down and play a fighter or a barbarian or something like that. That is to say, not that they can't be intelligent, but oftentimes intelligence is a dump stat for them. I want characters typically that I play to be faces, talkers, folks that figure people out, good to have in a dungeon, things like that. So I almost always look at the rogue because classically they've been the skill monkey, the canary in the coal mine. You get to kind of go out there and figure the thing out first, and that's always been fun for me. And if I get to do that and make people laugh, then all the better.
There it is. The true
It's worth
performer.
noting that having intelligence as a dump stat does not stop you from stepping in front of someone and trying to be the one that talks to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when to great result, I'm sure.
Yeah, for some reason,
Always.
Orson is always the planner, and then the rest of the party's like, why are you even talking? Go sit down. Let's start with Betwixt first, and then we'll talk about Ozzy. But did you want to be a goblin before you were a necromancer, or did you choose necromancer out of necessity because we lost our cleric?
I chose necromancer first for sure. I had found like an outline that someone had put online and was like, this is awesome. Every now and then I can heal people and I can also raise an undead army. I'm
Hell
in.
yeah.
And I was honestly thinking tiefling first, but Rachel and I were both creating a new character to add to the party around the same time. And she had told me she was thinking the same thing. So that sent me back to the drawing board because I hadn't really decided anything other than necromancer. And so I really wanted to lean into like how witchy I could get it. And, you know, a little cackling green goblin with a long pointy nose flying on a broom, raising the dead does it.
It's pretty
And
much right there, I think.
Yeah.
You did it. And then your satyr warlock. How'd you come to him?
Like I said, I definitely chose satyr first. I like to play if I can customize it and make it as weird as possible, I will. So I chose satyr and then was trying to think of something that would relate to it. And I also wanted to get as far away from like the spooky witchy element that I was playing with Betwixt. So Ozzy's like very bro-y, very dumb. He like puts himself in harm's way because he doesn't know any better. He is drunk and stoned most of the time, hardly paying attention to what's going on. So it's fun to like be able to play two sides of that coin. Like Ozzy would be terrified of Betwixt. Too spooky. No way. Not doing it.
Oh yeah. It's a good goblin.
Yep.
All right. And I think we talked about it a bit on the last episode that you were on, Fred, but refresh us if Bard came before human and how you came to Cassian.
Bard came first for Cassian. Human was sort of an afterthought because it fit with some of the stuff that I wanted to do with the character. Just like the amount of flexibility that you get with a human allowed me to kind of spec Cassian in a way that I wanted to. So I guess in some ways it's interesting because like Bard, in the same way that human is kind of the most like do everything all rounder kind of race in D&D, Bard is kind of that for classes in a way. And, you know, when I was joining the party, I was the last person to join the party on improvised weapons. Well, of the initial crew, you know, we had one more join us like when we had been recording for a while. But the other three had already chosen their classes. And so, you know, I was like looking at the party composition and I felt like we needed a sneaky guy. But I wanted to have some magic because I just like magic and it's D&D and there's wizards and dragons and magic is fun. So Bard is like the easiest thing to sort of tweak into whatever archetype you want it to be because they have like this ability where they just get extra skill points to put into whatever skills they want at level 3. And so you can really beef out some of your skills. So I was like, okay, I'll make a Bard and I'll make him kind of like a sneaky roguish bard archetype, like a rogue but with magic basically.
But not an arcane trickster.
No, not exactly. You know, I thought about it. I did think about arcane trickster actually, but I felt like bard, I think in some ways like the arcane trickster subclass is not that well designed, and in a lot of ways like bard kind of does what the arcane trickster is supposed to do better.
I concur.
But that's just personal.
Yeah. And obviously I've been listening to the show, but I don't think that Cassian could be anything but a bard. And that's both a testament to your playing him, but also how the game is developed. And it's like, well, what else am I going to do? I'm going to be boastful and I'm going to cast some spells and I can't see in the dark. Obvious too. Shit.
Yeah, well, it's one of those, I mean, it's the great thing about D&D, right? It's like you make a few choices, and even if you're sort of trying to make some of those decisions in a kind of like a gamey way, as I was, like to try and max out certain stats for certain utilities, like they end up kind of shaping your character in ways that you didn't expect. And once I sort of hit on the idea that Cassian's whole thing was that he was basically, his magic was kind of just him like lying so hard that the universe warped around him, like it shaped everything else about the character from there on out. I was like, yeah, this is great.
Go ahead.
Did you build a human version of the improbability engine? Is that what you're saying?
That is, yeah, that's almost exactly what Cassian is
That's
about.
incredible. Well done.
If you're not listening to Improvised Weapons by now, you should be, because you can catch up, because they're still on hiatus as of our recording. So while we're still in the grid view here, I just want to go around each class and have everybody raise your hand if you've played that class before. And let's start with Bard. Who has played a Bard before? Who has played a Necromancer? Who has played a Warlock? Who has played a Halfling?
The two real halflings have played halflings.
Yeah, obviously.
It is known.
Now the question is, have you played halfling when that was a class and not a race?
And because I am multi-class, has anybody played a sorcerer? All right. Fighter. Druid. Barbarian. And monk. Nice. So let's look at all the diversity we have in our class.
And Blood Hunter.
Oh, that's true. Well, we'll get to crazy classes at some point.
Yeah.
If I have the energy to do that many episodes. Let's get back into the individual questions here, and I'm going to start with Jordan this time. You've talked about it a bit, but I'm actually going to bind two questions here. What do you love most about your class, and what do you feel is lacking about the rogue?
I think the rogue is fun because it is a variety type class that feels like a core class. I think when you're assembling a party, it's always like, all right, we've got the big tank, the damage dealer, the one that's going to deal with the magic stuff, the wizard, right? The cleric, short straw draws the cleric usually. And then the rogue has to do everything else. It's a variety type character. It's a lot of fun. It offers a lot. But the class ability I love the most is obviously sneak attack, which if it wasn't already broken in 3.5, it's completely busted in 5e. All you need to do for all that excess damage is to just have an ally within 5 feet of the enemy you're already fighting, or to have advantage. And if you're a swashbuckler, you could just use rakish audacity, which means you just have to be not within 5 feet of anyone else. So that means you're always dealing the sneak attack damage, and this thing goes up by another die 6 every other level. So you could end up being the party's primary damage dealer as of 5th edition, which is unbelievable. But I like it for its variety. I like it because it gets to deal damage and feel significant in a way without being the frontline fighter necessarily. It does things in an interesting way. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry. I seem to have.
What is lacking?
What is lacking? Nothing. The rogue is amazing. What is lacking in the rogue? I don't know. You are still a bit squishy, but you can't do it all. They can't make a character that has everything. I will say that the upper level rogue abilities are not amazing. I've played higher level rogues before, and they're good. But if you look at like another class, like the monk, it's like the monk by high level, it's like you can't be harmed by anything. You're immune to poisons and you're immortal and you can eat rocks and gain hit points. I mean, it's amazing. The rogue is like you dodge better. But even more now you're really good at dodging stuff. Look at you dodging those things. So that's all you get.
Mr. Dodge, hoo, 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 hoo. And the monk's over there going, I'm catching shit out of the air, eating it and breathing fire.
Right. The monk can turn into gas or liquid at will. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, monks are insane. And speaking of monks, Jess, what do you love about being a monk and what could use some work?
I mean, Jordan kind of said everything cool about monks already.
Sorry.
No. They're like super versatile, like kind of like rogues. Rogues are super versatile too. But with monks, like you add the key points in there with their versatility, and you can just like spend key points and just keep hitting things or doing other cool shit. I like to think of monks as what barbarians are to strength, monks are to dexterity. Like they're kind of two sides of the same coin, just with different stats. So in my party, we also have a fighter. So I'm not necessarily the big damage dealer, but I definitely have the most opportunities to hit as the monk. And as far as what's lacking, I don't know that I would say it's lacking per se, but I'm not nuts about the way of the 4 elements, the way it works, because it's essentially like if Avatar were a D&D class. But to me, I feel like the way of the 4 elements, dealing all the elemental spells, feels more complicated than actually being a spellcaster. On top of having to know all the other cool shit monks do. So I just feel like it's overly complicated as far as that subclass goes. But I think that's really my only criticism of the monk class so far.
Speaking of overly complicated, Dylan, fighters.
Let me tell you, man,
Huh.
I could write a dissertation on how much work is required before every session. It's unbelievable. You know, I don't know how I hold down a job, you know, during all of it. So as far as things to like about the fighter, let's be honest, they are super effective. It's the right Pokemon in every battle. Like, no matter what, you're ready to jump in. You can do just about anything. And honestly, like, if you are willing to think it through and wait long enough, some of the subclasses do give you some cool toys to play with. You don't get spells, but especially things like Battle Masters. I do think much like you said about the Arcane Trickster, I think the Eldritch Knight is not an especially good subclass. Because you're basically saying I'm super good at fighting, or I can cast an okay spell and then my turn's over, which is sort of how it works. Is you get like 3rd level magic at level 12, but you do with things like Battlemaster, and even if you get into some of the more specific subclasses like Samurai, like you can do some reasonably cool things. The real problem with the fighter is that at 9th level, you have every toy you're going to get. After 9th level, it is here's another version of this, and here's another use of that, and here's this a different time. And you don't get any new things to do, especially in the upper levels. And it's because it's so front loaded. At level 3, I can jump in, hit with as much damage as I possibly can. If you play the variant human, I've already got a feat to add to my output in level 3. I can heal myself if I'm hurt. If the guy's not dead, I can start my turn over and do it all again. You can do a lot early days, and then you sort of peter out later on. And so the lack of new things as you advance, I think, is the hardest thing about playing it.
Do you think you might multi-class at some point, if that's the case?
So that's definitely something that the fighter lends itself to. And in knowing a lot more about the game, it's 2 years ago that this fighter entered into the arena, and now knowing a lot more, the fighter is awesome as a multi-class dip for someone who started as something else. You start as a rogue, you start as even a barbarian can get a lot out of basically any martial class can get a lot out of dipping 3 levels of fighter. It's kind of amazing what you can build up. So
yeah.
It's definitely something that's worth considering, but the more you know.
Speaking of barbarian, look at these transitions. Guys, this is great. Olash, Nicole, what works? What doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, I just personally, like, aside from the reasons I stated before for choosing Barbarian, another reason I chose is I love being a tank. Like, I love being in the middle of all the battles. I love if like one of my squishier friends is getting hammered on, being able to just rush in and like take some of the damage for them. And I feel like barbarians, as they level up, are structured to just not even just in terms of like hit points and constitution, but there's like other built-in things you get that just make it harder and harder for you to be killed outright, which was always super helpful. So the next thing I'm going to say is kind of like part of my plus and part of my like minus, which is that in our campaign in improvised weapons in the party, I was the only one that wasn't a spellcaster. And so it did always feel really good when everyone else was running out of spells and spell slots and could just like fire off their cantrips, which weren't really doing much anymore. And I was just like the only one that could keep going in and like dealing with side. It also gets a little boring to just like keep hacking and slashing while everyone's like, I cast dimension door and I just like fly away into another universe. Like it's just, or like banishing people and I'm just like, all right, I have my axe. So it's I had not really dealt with that before because I had not leveled up a barbarian this far before, which I think is where it really comes into play when people start getting some super cool spells. I finally started getting jealous.
Having played a barbarian, I feel you. It's like, yeah, I got a D12, but I still got to hit. And if I don't hit, fuck, it's really frustrating because yeah, you're super strong. You are built to kill. And if you roll a 2, fuck. But once again, you guys, you're writing this show for me. Speaking of banishment, let's talk about playing the necromancer. Poor Matt has tried banishment 5 times, 6 times, and it's worked.
It finally
once.
worked.
It's worked once. So I know you had to homebrew this, and it is based on the wizard build. What are some of the pros and what are some of the cons of the necromancer?
So yeah, it's built. It has the same like chart and progression as a wizard does, but you cast with charisma like a sorcerer or a warlock. Because the whole idea is that you're trying to like bend everything to your will, like taking this corpse and like forcing it to come back. And the homebrew that I'm following has a lot of really great perks and a lot of downsides. The best part is that it walks a fine line between doing something harmful and helpful at the same time. Like a lot of characters like shun necromancers or are like turned off by that idea. It's something that's gross. It's something that you're not supposed to play with. But at the same time, this character is like a necromancer for good, more or less, and also uses their abilities to give their own like cohorts life back. So it's not just about like forcing a corpse back to life. It's also about like bringing life everywhere, to the dead and to the living. So that's definitely like why I love playing a necromancer, is like building that whole philosophy of like good, bad, I guess you tell me, does it matter? What I don't like is that in the same vein, it feels a little bit like raising the dead and healing people are two separate parts of like this character. The way it's written, it doesn't feel as unified as I just said it, like while it's happening. So much so that up until like last week, I forgot that I could heal other players. Like I haven't done it for so long. I just got so focused on raising the dead. I was like, oh yeah, I guess that like making a huge undead scorpion is the bombastic play that I'm gonna use. Do you really need those hit points back?
It's very jester of you.
Yeah, I mean, which is why people like shit on clerics so much, right?
Yeah.
It's like, as far as being a warlock goes, I could talk all day about why I love and hate it. But basically it comes down to like playing a spellcaster like a necromancer and then a spellcaster like a warlock. I feel super, super handicapped, really undersupplied. The best part of playing a warlock is also the worst part, which is choosing your pact boon. And for me, the only thing that made sense was to choose Pact of the Chain, which gives you a familiar. And of course I have a sprite, like I have a fairy that flies around with me, and he is utterly useless as far as like functionality goes. He means almost nothing to my character. But the good side of that is that I play him like he's been sent because Ozzy's such a fuck up that this fairy is there to like pull his hair and be like, you are not following your mission. Get back to work. What are you doing?
Very Tinkerbell.
So like, it's a love-hate.
Yeah, for sure. Jess.
First of all, hey, listen. But no, I had a question for Matt, actually, about your necromancer. You said you built it sort of on the wizard track.
Yeah.
Did you consider using any of the like grave cleric stuff, or is there a reason you chose wizard versus like modeling it more after the grave cleric?
My initial intention was to play a grave cleric, and I couldn't find anything online that was like a full build at the time. I don't know if I was calling it the wrong thing. I was not listening to Critical Role at the time, so I did not know. I was doing a lot of Googling for like Death Cleric, and that's how I came upon this specific necromancer, which at level 2, you join in a cult, and the cult that I'm a part of is called the Keepers, which is about healing as much as it is raising the dead. I didn't come up with all of this on my own. I am following something that someone else wrote. It's on D&D Wiki, I think. But
The
yes.
homebrew aspect was what he needed to do to put it into D&D Beyond.
Yeah.
Because it didn't exist at that time.
Right.
I see.
But the grave cleric stuff that you're talking about, I absolutely would have put some of that flavor in there so that it leans like a little bit more toward the like healing and less on the like raising the dead, even though that is like so much fun.
Cool.
Absolutely. Next, the Druid. It's good. It's good. It's got some flaws. How do you feel about it?
It definitely has its like good and bad parts to it. The thing that I love about it now is the thing I like hated about it when I started playing it. I was super stoked I was playing a halfling rogue in our game originally, and then I switched and I wanted to be I like hearing you talk about it, Jordan. Now I like want to play it again and have a little bit more fun with it because did not enjoy it. Well, Lincoln killed her, so
I can bring that character back for you.
Oh yeah, wait, bring Diola back. But I wanted to be a spellcaster, and at the time we didn't really have too many spellcasters in our group, and so I was super stoked to play a druid. And druids, like lower level, you know, you roll and it's kind of like a barbarian. You roll, you miss, but then if the spell doesn't work or it, you know, doesn't succeed, then you kind of don't really have much else. So I got very frustrated that, you know, there wasn't really much I could do with like the first, second level spells until I kind of leaned into the whole, you know, environmental thing and manipulating the environment. So like using entangled a little bit better and like molding earth and letting, you know, spikes grow and throw ground everywhere and make holes and you know, call lightning and all of that stuff. Like, and as a, you know, a higher level druid now, I have a lot more spells that did damage. So at first that was really what frustrated me is I wasn't doing any damage. I just felt like really useless in the group. Like every time I tried to do something, it wouldn't succeed. And then I didn't really have much melee stuff because I'm a tiefling druid. Like I'm very squishy. I have nothing really going on. But then leveling up, now that's what I love about it is that I can like entrap and restrain and make difficult terrain and do all of this cool stuff that helps other players. And then we can kind of just like go all in on it. And I've kind of made her Nax a little bit more, I feel a little bit more essential than I did at the beginning. And I think that's kind of like, it's tough to be that kind of spellcaster is that you really have to work at it a little bit more than like maybe a wizard that has a lot of damage spells that, you know, right out of the gate or you know, any other of the other classes and races that like do more damage. So I definitely, a druid can definitely feel a little bit useless until you kind of get a feel for it. So it took me a while to get a feel for it, but it ended up being what I love about it. And it ended up being, it's a lot of fun to like, you have to do a little bit more work at it, I think, with a druid.
It's so funny to hear you say that you felt useless in this party, considering how many times Nax has been the MVP of fights with Wall of Thorns and Call Lightning and Conjuring Animals. It's just like we did this great session once where everybody rolled really poorly on a perception check when we bedded down one night, and I was like, oh, okay, everybody tell me what you're afraid of. I don't know why it ended up that way, but that's what we did. And what Nax shared was that she felt like she wasn't vital to this group. And then in the very next combat, she fucking dominated. And it was awesome. I didn't cheat for her. The party didn't cheat for her. It was just like, she was rolling really well. It was just like, Naxori is here. Let's do it.
But that's like the thing with the druid. Like if you luck out, then yeah, you could be a fucking badass, but if you don't look at it, especially on the lower levels, then you're just like in the corner behind a shrub
or being a shrub
or being a shrub. Well, wild shape really is kind of the best thing that, yeah, I love wild shape very, very much. And that ends up coming in clutch a lot.
Jordan, you had a comment.
Yeah, I think some of your frustration with Nax actually might be the fault of Wizards of the Coast a bit. I remember playing with druids in 3.5. I never was a druid, but it seemed to be, it was like the party would show up and then 20 dire apes would show up and you'd say, oh, that's our druid. And you can't really do that anymore because they got rid of animal companion and natural spell, and they made summoning much harder. Those kinds of conjuration spells now take like hours to be able to do that kind of a thing. So it's just they really limited or handicapped the druid's ability to show up as like a stampede of something to overrun the opponent. Now things are, yeah, I guess more character focused and a little bit more limited. So I could see that being frustrating, especially at like level 5 and below, because really all then you have is like your cool wild shape, which at least refreshes on a short rest now, but that's really the only advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I thought druids did have an animal companion, and I was super bummed that they don't anymore. That I found out. I do have a goat that kind of likes me.
Nice.
For now.
She likes you a hell of a lot more than she likes Arliss. That's for sure. Jess, you had a comment.
I wanted to second what Jordan said because I have played a druid in both 3.5 and Pathfinder. And 5e druids, lower level druids, are kind of bleh. Like, wild shape's kind of the only thing you get that's real cool. But yeah, they got rid of animal companion. I played druids for years, and you could do crazy shit. And now lower level 5e druids are just kind of like, I'm gonna like summon a squirrel, you know. So yes,
Hey,
I agree that I
squirrels can
think
be very helpful.
they can.
You're foraging.
But
Roll
it's
a
not just you,
survival
Rachel,
check
it's
for
not
your
just you.
squirrel.
That actually makes me feel better. Thank you both.
And lastly, the bard. We touched on it a bit, but what are the great things and what are the things that could use some work?
For sure, the strength of the bard is kind of in what I was talking about earlier, which is like the versatility of it. So bard is super customizable. Even right out of the gate in the like very first player's handbook for 5e, they have like a couple of bard subclasses that allow you to customize like pretty different archetypes. There's like a swashbuckler kind of bard, and like there's the College of Lore, which is what I chose, which is kind of like, it's like the bard that's even more of a bard archetype. So in some ways it's a little bit boring because like most of what you get is just more skill proficiency and more customization of like your spells and things that the bards already do. So it's almost hard to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the bard as an entire class because there's so many different types of bards now. There's the College of Satire, which is basically a bard that's also a little bit of a rogue, which is like a way better version of the arcane trickster, as we were talking about. And I think maybe like that can be both blessing and a curse, right? Because the bard doesn't have necessarily as clear of a single archetype to follow, and it can be helpful sometimes to know that like, okay, you're a druid, so like your strength is going to be like shape shifting and controlling and manipulating the environment, and you can really focus on that. With the bard, you have so many options that it can sometimes be easy to pick bad ones, or at least ones that don't necessarily that aren't as useful as you thought they would be, or wouldn't, or don't give you the play experience that you thought they would. So like in my case, as I said, I went with College of Lore bard, and there's some stuff that's really cool about the College of Lore, like especially the cutting words, which is really fun because it's just an excuse to insult your enemies and make them hit you less because of it. Bards only get D8 hit points, so anything that makes people hit you less is gold. And it makes you a really good support player too, because you can deflect not just attacks aimed at you, but attacks aimed at your friends, which has been awesome. It feels very satisfying to like feel like you've saved a party member's life when they're at pretty low hit points and somebody tries to swipe at them and you're like, nah, you smelly heap of parrot droppings or whatever. But on the minus side, part of why I chose College of Lore was to get the extra magical secrets that you get, which is basically the bard's ability to steal spells from other classes in case the bard already wasn't enough of like doing what other classes do, but with more flexibility. And I thought that would be cool to give me a little bit of extra options in terms of like damage dealing spells and combat efficiency, which the bard doesn't have a ton of. But since we already had a wizard in the party, they just ended up taking a lot of the cool spells that I was thinking about taking as a bard, and it's just less exciting to have two people in the group who can also cast lightning bolt or whatever. So that put a damper on some of the fun things about the College of Lore for me. So I guess, yeah, the bard class's strengths are also its weaknesses, as with many classes, I think.
College of Lore, I'm the bard that I'm playing is also College of Lore, and mine took it pretty much solely to get access to teleportation because he doesn't want to be anywhere near that business. So being able to bounce out was super important, and bards do not get that. But I actually wanted to ask you, in hearing you describe Cassius, the thing that I thought of, and I think it's still in UA, and we're not Adventurers Leaguers here as far as I know, is the College of Creation. Have you read any of that? It's literally about willing things into existence and animating stuff, and it's like super dope. And,
no, I had not heard anything
about
about this.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's UA, so I don't think it's official anywhere, but it is so cool. And yeah, it's because it would have been so much more work to do it. I also didn't because I don't have Matt's patience with the home brewing and also can't pen and paper with any efficiency. But it sounds very Cassius.
Yeah, I wish I had known about that. I actually do love fiddly homebrewy kind of shit, so that would have been right up my alley. The DM might not have allowed it because our DM right out the gate was DMing for his first time ever, and so he was keeping us to the core races and classes to start with. So it might not even have been practical had I known about it. But yeah, that's definitely sounds like what I had envisioned for Cassian. And not to like totally monopolize the podcast here, but you did remind me of one other thing that I feel like is not exactly lacking about the Bard class, but I feel like it could be better. Some of the stuff that you picture like a bard doing, if you think of the archetype of a person who's like songs and performances, reshape reality, don't really come across in the way the Bard class is designed. Like, for one thing, you don't actually really ever have to do any kind of music to be a bard, which is good and bad. I mean, like, I am not actually that great at improvising songs, so I kind of stopped trying to do that pretty early on in the podcast. But, there's like a couple of spells or class abilities that require you to insult people or make jokes, right? But other than that, the idea that you are a musician or a performer of some kind is really just kind of like flavor text. It's not, there's nothing mechanical about the class that supports that feel. And I don't necessarily have a great idea for what I would change to fix that, but I think it could be improved.
Jess had a comment, and then Matt and Dylan, I'm sure you want to chime in with your Benny songs, which are fantastic.
One, yes, I have read, I've looked at the College of Creation stuff. It looks so cool. I know that they're workshopping a lot of new subclasses and stuff, so I really hope that is one of them. Also, for cutting, back to Fred talking about cutting words is the best. And I, for my bard, had like a notebook full of just insults that I would like throw out. So I definitely recommend making like a little notebook of like, oh, what if I sang this song for this spell? I definitely did that because I'm a dork.
Whenever it wasn't my turn in combat, like 90% of my brain power was like thinking of different insults based on what specific enemies we were fighting. I was like, what can I say about this guy that'll just really wound him?
And especially because he's on a comedy podcast, that's what you should be doing. So applause to you, sir. Matt.
I just wanted to say official material, unofficial material, shit you find on the internet, whatever.
As long as your DM's okay with it.
Of course. Just got to make sure you're not overpowered.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I did want to say, as far as the like coming up with songs, I kind of feel you on that. I've tried to, in the way that like components, unless they cost something, are also just flavor, because you could just like hold a cross and say I cast all my spells and fuck you. I've tried to do like, I keep a hand drum and like have things that happen, but the 6 second limitation makes it tough, right? You can't play a song in 6 seconds. So even for Bardic Inspiration, where I do, my favorite part of this character is spoofing pop songs. I'm just Sam Riegel, except way less good, but like spoofing pop songs to be Bardic Inspiration. So I've made it so that it's not me actually performing the song. I lock on to the player that I want it, and only they hear it. And it's more like a psionic thing. And this plays in their head, whatever I say, until they use the inspiration, which to me makes them just want to do it, because you've got to get this earworm out of your head. But yeah, I've tried. It takes a little doing to make the musical aspect of it, or the performative aspect of it, really fit, especially into combat. Because again, you got 6 seconds at a time. Like that's not even a verse. What are you supposed to do?
Exactly. All right, ladies and germs, we are coming to the end of this episode, and I'm going to round it out with a 2-part question, and we're going to do it a little quicker than normal. We're going to go with, what class have you always wanted to play? And what class intimidates you the most? I'll tell you, I am insanely intimidated to play a wizard, mostly because of Matt's husband and the way that he plays a wizard. It's really good, and it's really hard for me to play against him. So the idea of playing that is daunting. But I've always wanted to play I just want to play a fighter. And I think that's why I made a barbarian NPC. Like Nicole said, sometimes you just don't want to think about it, and you just want to be the one who's like, it's my turn, smash. I did it. Great. Because playing a sorcerer warlock and a bird, like I'm flying, I'm trying to buff people, I'm trying to do all this stuff, and I'm trying to take notes on story stuff because I'm one of the more experienced members of the party. So I'm, trying to move things along with the DM as well. Let's just do opposite order. And we'll start with Fred, and we'll work our way back. Fred, what do you really want to play, and what scares you?
Okay, so just for the record, I was not raising my hand in the chat because I desperately wanted to go first. I was just kind of curious about what specific things Matt's husband does as a wizard that's super cool, because you've intrigued me, because that is a class that seems simultaneously potentially really cool and also like it requires an enormous amount of notes.
I will speak to that first, and then I will let Matt, because I know that they tag team a lot of the stuff they do. Mm-hmm. Alex is very well read on spell casting and how magic works. And for everything that all the books that I've read and all the forums that I've been on about D&D and about DMing, Alex has read all of that about Wizard. So I'm like, I do this. And he's like, no, you don't. That's not how it works. I'm like, I'm going to do this. Well, I'm going to do this instead. He has counterspelled me. I have this cool story thing I want to do. And he's just like, counterspell. And I could say, no, it works this time because of story. But all right, fine. It doesn't work. Moving on. So but Matt, I'll let you speak to it as well.
He's really good at the hat trick. He uses the spell that's the least obvious choice that no one saw coming. You're like, wait, why would you? Oh my God. So like we were fighting this cyber, what was his name? Zardrax?
Oh yeah.
The beholder in a mech suit.
Yep.
And so we're all like,
it was Krang
throwing magic and hitting it as best we can. And he just gets his wizard right up close, and he dropped a bag of holding into what is the
rope trick.
He dropped a portable hole into
rope trick, which opened an extra dimensional black hole and sucked him away, and that's where it ended. Because he's read like all the like other side of how this magic works and things you shouldn't want to do. But if you know how it works, you can use it to your benefit in a scenario like that. So he's not dead. He's just
the Ghostbusters moment. Don't cross the streams. He crossed the streams. Now Zardrax is in the astral sea somewhere, really pissed. Mm-hmm. And he'll be back, but just shit like that, where it's like, I would never expect you to use, and narratively, his rope trick is like his sanctum. It's full of books and he loves it there. And since then, he's had these story moments where like he opens his rope trick and it's just bare concrete walls. And he's just like, I can't even be in here anymore because it's so depressing. And it's just like, oof, okay, I got some writing to do. Shit. But anywho, the question, Fred, what do you really want to play and what are you kind of intimidated to play?
So I have long wanted to play a druid. If you couldn't guess by the way that I talked about bards, I'm really interested in classes that can do kind of a little bit of everything, partly because combat in D&D can get boring sometimes, especially if all you can do is like a couple variations on hitting somebody with a weapon or whatever. Like I've noticed in particular, like the Warlock character in our party on improvised weapons, or not the character, but the player, Lindsay, gets frustrated a lot of the time because she ends up just casting Eldritch Blast over and over again. Druids, they've got a lot of spell casting that does like a bunch of non-standard stuff that's designed to like interact with the world around them. And so instead of just like producing a blast of something, they're like reshaping stuff around them. And then they're also changing themselves. They can transform into all of these different kinds of animals. And it just seems like there's so many kind of like levers and knobs to pull that work in ways that aren't just solely wrapped up in like the description of the spell, but have to do with what's going on around them, that it seems like a really fun and flexible way to do creative stuff. And also it seems like a class that you could have a lot of fun with in terms of story and their narrative arc, because they've kind of got this like nature worship thing going on, this idea that they're sort of protectors of the land in some way. It feels like a very good thing that you can tie into a lot of quest hooks. I actually was thinking about being a druid on improvised weapons until I realized that the party probably needed a sneaky person more than they needed a nature boy. But I have this idea that I've wanted to do for a long time that's a druid that's kind of like a sinister like Lovecraft cult druid, where like they worship nature as this like slumbering god that's like slowly awakening to its own power and will someday like rise into the upper planes to devour the other deities and stuff.
Yeah.
I came up with the idea because I was reading through the different kinds of like circles of the land that druids can have, and I noticed that there was a swamp one. And that got me thinking about what a swamp druid would be like. And then it got me thinking about like Call of Cthulhu with the weird cultists out in the swamp doing strange rites. And I was like, yeah, let's do that druid.
Nice. And what are you intimidated to play?
Cleric has always intimidated me somewhat, because I've heard and read a lot of stuff from people saying that like Cleric can actually be kind of a badass class, that like if you play it right, there's a lot of really cool powerful stuff you can do. But it also seems like some of that is like tricky to pull off. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to know your stuff to be able to do it right. And it seems like it might be kind of easy to fall into just being like a very generic sort of holy warrior archetype that I'm just not that interested in. So like what intimidates me about it is having the know-how to play it in a way that is fun and has the variety that is interesting to me, because it's very easy, I feel like, with a cleric to just fall into like, oh, well, I'm going to kind of be a bit of a defender and a bit of a healer and also a bit of a buzzkill because I'm the only one that has to answer to a higher power.
Very true. In my experience, I've only played clerics as party NPCs. So playing one as an actual character, I think like fleshing them out and making them not just like, oh, it's my turn, you're hurt, cure wounds here and healing word there, and I'm going to move back and that's my turn. Your turn now. So yeah, cleric's intimidating for me as well. Matt, how about you? What do you really want to play, and what is just too spooky for you?
I think I've actually already decided what my next character will be, and I won't talk too much about it, but like I really am interested by the Artificer.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. As like in my real life, I am like a maker of things. And so that kind of idea really, really piques my interest. So I'm probably set on that for the future. What intimidates me is a bard. It just seems like it has so many moving parts and there's so much going on that I'm just going to stick with the other classes.
There are a lot of plates to spin when you're a bard, that's for sure. Jordan, how about you?
Matt stole my answer. No, he didn't steal it. But the class I most want to play or to try is an artificer, but I can't find a dungeon master that is generous enough to share the real estate. As a character that creates things, you're automatically sort of at odds with the dungeon master, and you need a collaborative relationship. So it's like, hey, if I'm going to start creating entities, things in your world, and you're not going to let me have that power, the relationship's not going to work out. And every time I've approached one of my DMs with it, they're always kind of like, oh, well, we have to see how that works and whatever. So they're kind of reluctant to give it up a little bit because it is a little bit more storytelling power than usual. And Matt said it very nicely. I mean, you're a maker in the game. You're having power that could be approaching the level of the game master's power. So you have to be careful with that. But I've always wanted to be some kind of tinker character that creates little robots, or even just, does something with ancient artifacts or something like that. Be like an Indiana Jones type character. It'd be awesome. But you get to make some of the stuff would be the point.
Yeah.
I'm intimidated by playing fighters. I thought the Echo Knight was pretty cool when I saw that subclass come out. And then I was like, I'm already intimidated by fighters. Now there's going to be 2 of me. Forget it. But I'm intimidated by being the one that's just like, oh, it's your responsibility to deal all the damage. Don't die. I do find that a little intimidating because, as I admitted earlier, all of my characters just sit in the back of the party and snark, and they cast spells at very far distances. So I think there's a lot on the line when you are the party's front line, and that's intimidating for me.
Jordan, I think that's the theater kid in us. We're just like, you guys handle it. I'll be back here being funny.
Yeah. Nice axe, from 400 feet away with like Warcaster.
Here's a D8 when you need it, by the way, Bardic Inspiration.
Yeah.
Don't kill me. Dylan.
Oh, that's funny. So my actual answer is different, but I will say hearing Fred talk about Cassian makes me really want to play another kind of bard sometime, like trying to like play around with all the different things they can do. But I'm already playing one and I'm really enjoying him, so I'm not gonna shelve him quite yet. I think in the want to play and am intimidated by, my answer is the same, and that is a Warlock. I am so enthralled with the backstory capabilities of Warlocks and all the things you can have. And having watched Matt play one that isn't like dark and brooding and, I don't know about this whole patron thing I've got, is kind of fresh and different, and trying to come up with a story that plays behind a Warlock would be amazing. And I think sometime down the line, I really, really want to do that and dig in more than I even ever have before into what that background is and what my character wants and why they've done what they've done. But I'm also super intimidated by it, partially because of how much work that is, but also because I've played a fighter who, as me and Nicole talked about, the martial characters, they don't run out. You just, until you run out of hit points, you're not out of anything. And so there's something really great about that. You're always in the fight, no matter kind of how long a day it's been, especially with all the ways you have to stay alive. And a bard, you get full spellcasting spell slots. You get a lot of other toys you can play with, things you can do that aren't using those slots. At the end of the day, you've still got something. Warlock is an interesting one where resource management becomes a huge thing that like kind of eats up your day, and figuring out how to do that and convincing the party to lay down for an hour when you've run out of everything after one battle. I look forward to it, but I am intimidated by that challenge, by how to play that in a way that is fresh and new and interesting.
When I multiclassed into Warlock with crew, I was super intimidated by it because my exposure to Warlocks had been Lindsay from Improvised Weapons. And I knew that you cast your spells at your highest spell slot, and then you have like 2, and then you just cantrip all day. So thankfully I was already a sorcerer, so I can use my sorcery spells. And then I flavor the Warlock as like new stuff that I don't quite understand because I just got it from this Demogorgon, and I'm like, what does this do? Ooh, that was neat. I'm gonna do this other thing, but I'm gonna come back to that. That was cool. Rachel, how about you?
For me, I actually really wanted to play a rogue again, which I do play in our other game, because I enjoyed playing the rogue part of the halfling rogue. So, but if I had to choose another one, I wanted to be a wizard for a long time. And Alex is really good at it, which is also why I am kind of into a little bit of like a different kind of spell casting. He's definitely showcased like what you could do with a wizard. I think it's really interesting. Same for a warlock too, that kind of a different kind of spell casting. I am also very intimidated by being a fighter. I've never been a fighter, never really been interested in being a fighter. Part of me would love to kind of play the barbarian or a fighter or something like that and make a cool character and rush in, but anytime I've had to like melee fight, I get very frustrated with it. Obviously a fighter or a barbarian or something would be stronger than a tiefling, but I am very intimidated to play a fighter. That feels like more moving parts than spellcasting to me. Spellcasting feels like very not simple. It's still obviously a lot of work, but my brain works more with spellcasting than it would with like weapons, I think. So yeah, that kind of fighting a fighter definitely intimidates me, and I do want to play it at some point just to see what happens. But yeah, I am addicted to spellcasting.
I have a dream to create a very strong wizard who's like top stat is strength, and then next highest is wisdom or intelligence, whichever their modifier is. But like when you first meet him, you're like, who's this thug? And then he casts spells and punches you in the face. I think that'd be really fun.
If you troll around on like some of the like homebrew forums and like D&D forums from like 3.5 edition, and like especially the website that I'm most familiar with is Giant in the Playground, which is also hosts like a really awesome webcomic for those who aren't familiar with it, called The Order of the Stick, which is like a stick figure D&D comic that's amazing. Anyway, search for the phrase muscle wizard and because there are people who have like tried to figure out like the mechanics to do exactly what you're talking about, like a wizard that like is really beefy and fights in combat, and I'm pretty sure muscle wizard is the term that everybody
safe search on when you
right.
Safe search on.
Oh, where's the fun in that?
I was just gonna say Alex is a muscle wizard in real life, so there you go. Nicole, what do you think?
This is the question I think about all the time, especially since Improvised Weapons has been on hiatus. I have really only ever played barbarians. Like, I think I did one session as a bard and one session as a sorcerer. And other than that, like both campaigns I've ever been in, I've been a barbarian. So I switch between all of them every day. I'm like, ooh, I think I want to play this next or that. But the one I really keep coming back to is rogue. I would really love to play a rogue at some point, for all of the reasons that have already been said in this episode. And even though I've played it once before, the thing I am most intimidated by is a bard. Specifically, I was already intimidated by the idea of a bard, but then there was one episode of Improvised Weapons where we had to go through this whole challenge where there were different challenges in different rooms based on all of us. And the room that was for Cassian, basically he had to come up with rhymes to guide people through a maze. And I was just like, there's no way that I could ever do anything like that. Like I'm not good at improvising. I'm not good at coming up with stuff on the spot. And so that just like that right there was like nail in the coffin. Like I will maybe always be too afraid to play a bard for the things that my DM could do to me.
And Sam is an intimidating DM. Let's just put that out there. I would be scared to play with Sam, and I've listened to the entirety of your show, and I'd still be like, I'm good on the sidelines. If you need another bard over here, I can do that, because that's about as safe as I feel. And it also seems like we have a one shot of all rogues that we could do at some point. That sounds fun.
That would be
all just
crazy.
a bunch of thieves of different races. So you have a half orc rogue who's big and strong, sneak attack, pow pow pow.
And you do it as a heist movie, like a heist.
Yes.
Like our own Ocean's 11.
Yes.
I actually really love this idea. We should do it.
Yes.
Just do this like off mic sometime, or even as part of the podcast.
Hey, I got a season 2 to make, so we got an episode.
Let's just do it. That'd be
Start
really
building
fun.
your characters. All right. Lastly, Jess, what you got
That's
for
me.
us?
I'm also going to piggyback on what several people said, in that the character or the class I would like to play is a rogue, because I've never played one before. And I've always been slightly intimidated by them, but also knowing there's so many different like types of rogues that you can do. Like there's the arcane trickster, there's like the traditional rogue, but I'm interested in playing a rogue as like the assassin subclass. That sounds like if they could make rogues sneak attack do more stupid damage, that's the assassin one. So that's the one I want to play.
Nothing like a casual auto crit to wake you up in the morning.
Exactly.
You stabbed me and did 7,000 damage?
Uh-huh.
What?
Yeah, exactly. And then the class that has always intimidated me the most is the wizard. There's the spell list is so crazy. You can do anything pretty much. Plus then as a wizard you can learn spells that you're just like, oh, I found this scroll. I'm just going to spend 8 hours writing it down and I know it now. Like that's bonkers.
Yeah, that's why I went sorcerer. So it's just innate. And yeah, I can't change my spells until I level up, but I'll just pick good spells, hopefully.
Yeah, same with like bard. And isn't warlock works a little bit like that too, right?
I think warlock's
Where
on
you
a level.
kind of know.
Little bit, yeah. You can change invocations and spells at each level, but you don't necessarily learn them so much. They do come like kind of innate, like a sorcerer.
They're gifts from your patrons.
Yes.
All right, folks. This has been a delightful episode. Thank you all for being here. Went a little longer than normal, but we had a lot to talk about. So, hey, enjoy it. Let's do some plugs. This episode's going to drop on December 23rd. Merry Christmas, Matthew. Merry Christmas. So let's start with Jordan. Let's do some plugs.
I am a writer for a games company called Top Dog Games. You can find us at topdoggames.net. We make the product Stat Trackers, which is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition supplement. Helps out some DMs who like to keep things on both sides of the screen for the purposes of tracking initiative and their monsters' stats. Our Kickstarter, our most recent one, just did really well, so we'll be releasing the Friends and Foes expansion pack later in the year. You can still get that on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter's over, but you can still get the backer kit for that. And it's been a lot of fun creating some new monsters for the game, which has been real fun. So check us out. That's it for me.
And your handles.
Sorry, I forgot I had social media. Yes, you can find me at Smith and Robards, at Smith and Robards on Instagram, or you can find me on Twitter at Huey _JH on Twitter.
I really want those stat trackers. If anybody wants to buy me a Christmas present. Jess, let's do you.
I'm Jess. I am on a live stream Dungeons and Dragons show called Fables of Refuge. We're twitch.tv/fables_of_refuge. My personal social media on Twitter is JessNextDoorVO. And on Instagram, it's Jess Next Door, just no E in next. And if you want to follow Fables, we're at Fables Refuge on Instagram.
Hell yeah. Matt.
So you can find me at my website, which is matthewwoodsart.com, or more actively, you can find me on Instagram, where I post a lot of my work and pretty much a running comment of my pushy opinions and attitudes about Halloween through a character called Pumpkinhead. It is at HallowWoods, Hallow like Halloween and woods like the forest.
Exactly. Rachel.
You can find a lot of things about me on my website, www.rachelriendeau.com, RIENDEAU. My blog is on there. Short stories, fairy tales, things like that are all on there, as well as a newsletter. You can find me on Instagram at Le Petit Renard. And then I will also hopefully have some live stories on sartorialgeek.com, which I am a new contributor for. I don't have anything. I have a couple of things pending on there, but hopefully by the time this airs, they will be live. And that is a wonderful website that is full of all sorts of fun, geeky content.
Geeky content is what we're all about. Fred, tell us about Improvised Weapons and World Builders.
Improvised Weapons is a fantastic podcast on the Puma Knife Podcast Network. It is myself and Nicole and our friends John and Lindsay and Aaron, and we're all playing D&D with our DM, Sam. And it's really funny and a blast. It's on temporary hiatus right now, but there's like literally hundreds of episodes if you've never listened to it before. So by the time you get through all of the backstory or all of the story thus far, I'm sure we'll be recording again. So you won't be missing a beat. Yeah, just Google improvised weapons or go to Puma Knife. I don't actually know the URL. That's embarrassing.
Well, I mean, you're on it. Do you need to go to the
Improvised Weapons
website?
VT. Yeah. And then, so I have a project in development. It is not yet live, nor do we have like an official start date, but watch this space, I guess. It's going to be called The World Builders, and it's a podcast where myself and my friend Sarah and some guests will, rotating guests will be sort of collaboratively building out and fleshing out a fantasy world in which stories can take place. And the idea is it'll be just like a completely open source fantasy collaboration that anybody can sort of use as a backdrop for stories and art and whatever else they feel like. And it should be pretty funny because we're both like improvisers and most of the people we know are comedians. I am in a sketch comedy group called Yum Yum Sketch. You can find us at our Facebook page. Again, filming for that is on hiatus right now, but there's a bunch of really funny short sketches already there. You can find me on Facebook too, but you'll probably be bored senseless if you do. I pretty much just lurk on social media, so yeah, don't bother. I want to plug something that I'm not involved with anyway, just something that I just found and I love. It's and you'll love it too if you love D&D. It's called Dungeons and Daddies, and I'm probably the last person on earth that likes D&D that is not already wasn't already listening.
I know
to
them.
It. You know them personally?
Yes.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? We gotta talk. It's really funny. It's about 4 dads that are sucked into the world of D&D and have adventures trying to find their lost sons. It's amazing.
Dope. Bringing friends together. That's what this show's all about. Nicole.
You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Nicole Siskers. I don't know. I'm a stand-up comedian and I don't get to do that these days. So I don't have anything exciting happening at this time. I mean,
But
go
she
back and
is
listen to Improvised Weapons, but
Yeah.
and
she's a fantastic stand-up comedian.
Oh, thank you. Probably most of you will never find that out because who knows when I'll get to do it again, but
Soon.
I hope soon. You're so funny.
And Dylan.
I will close us out, I think I'm going last here, with also not boring you with my social media or anything that's going on in my life. But I will tell you that at this point, later on this year when this episode drops, I will be in the midst what I assume is like a 45-day celebration of my son's first birthday. So happy first birthday, little Pax. And we'll be enjoying that.
I bought him a present because I like buying presents. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. You can follow me on the socials at Lincoln L. Hayes. You can follow the show on the Instagram, Session Zero D&D Show. You can find all of this content on my website, lincolnlhayes.com/Session Zero. And if you would like to be a participant on this very show, you can go to that same website and fill out the survey, just like all these fine people did. And based on your responses, I have a spreadsheet. And I go through it and I determine who'd be good for what. And you might be able to join us on one of these panels. And as it is 2 days before Christmas 2020, is it over yet? All right, everyone. I love you all. Have a great night. Goodbye. Merry Christmas. Hey, it's me again. Did that seem like fun? All that D&D talk? Well, I could teach you if you want. Just go to my website, lincolnlhayes.com/storytelling, and take a look. I can teach it a couple hours, run through the basics with you, do a small session, see what you think. I can run it for just you and a couple friends, you and your family, you and some coworkers. What do you got to lose? If you don't like it, it's one night of TV you don't watch. But if you do like it, you have a hobby you could play for the rest of your life. Sounds good to me. Head over to my website, lincolnlhayes.com/storytelling. Let's chat. And thanks for watching Session Zero. See you next week.